The moment Karen Payton stormed up my driveway, her scowl practically radiating fury, I knew the showdown I'd been waiting for had arrived. Her finger stabbed the air like a dagger, and her voice, shrill enough to shatter glass, hit me before she even reached the porch. "David Thornton, you have 1 week to join the HOA, or I'll see you in court myself," she screeched, her face so red I half expected steam to pour from her ears. But as her tirade echoed across my pristine lawn, a sly grin crept across my face. "Oh, Karen, you just marched right into my trap, and I was ready to share every juicy detail with my MidnightTales audience on YouTube. Let me take you back a bit. I'm David Thornton, a real estate attorney who swapped the grind of city life for the quiet charm of Maple Ridge Estates 6 months ago. My corner lot, shaded by towering oaks and framed by a wraparound porch, was my slice of paradise, perfect in every way except for one tiny, glorious detail. My property line sat exactly 18 inches outside the HOA's jurisdiction. That's right, bylaws, no fees, and no Karen Payton, the self-appointed queen of Maple Ridge, breathing down my neck. I couldn't wait to tell my MidnightTales subscribers how this one fact would turn Karen's world upside down. Karen had ruled the Maple Ridge HOA for 8 years, her iron grip unchallenged thanks to a mix of intimidation and bureaucratic sleight of hand. Nobody could quite recall voting for her, yet she clung to the presidency like a monarch, fining people for grass half an inch too tall, or demanding pre-approval for a single dab of paint on a mailbox. She ran the neighborhood like her personal empire, and my arrival was about to spark a rebellion worthy of a MidnightTales episode. The trouble kicked off my second week in the house. Karen showed up with a welcome basket that was less about hospitality and more about controls stuffed with HOA bylaws, fee schedules, and compliance forms. Her voice dripped with saccharine sweetness as she informed me that new residents had 30 days to join the HOA and cough up a $500 initiation fee plus $150 monthly dues. I calmly showed her my property survey and deed, which clearly marked my lot as outside the HOA's boundaries. Her face morphed through shock, rage, and a shade of purple that could have rivaled a thunderstorm. "There's been a mistake," she snapped, snatching the papers from my hands, studying them for a tense minute, then thrusting them back. "I'll look into this." That was the moment her campaign against me began, and I knew my viewers would eat up every second of this drama. First came the letters, arriving almost daily on official HOA letterhead, each one more threatening than the last. They demanded I join immediately or face legal consequences, accusing me of freeloading off HOA services and dragging down property values. My lawn was immaculate, my house better maintained than most in the neighborhood, but facts didn't matter to Karen. I saved every letter in a folder, labeled evidence, already planning how I'd break this down for my MidnightTales channel. Then came the public shaming. At the monthly HOA meetings, held at the community center next to my property, Karen would spend the first 15 minutes ranting about the holdout on Elm Street, who refused to join. From my back deck, I could hear her dramatic flair as she claimed my non-compliance was costing everyone money and threatening their precious property values. Most neighbors stayed silent, too scared to challenge her, but I caught a few sympathetic glances as they shuffled out after meetings, waving from my porch like a cheeky spectator. Karen's creativity peaked with her forged notices. One morning, I found an official-looking document taped to my door, claiming the city had expanded the HOA boundaries to include my property. The letterhead looked legit at first glance, but a closer look revealed a slightly off city seal and a mayor's signature that was clearly traced. Another notice insisted state law required all homes within 500 feet of an HOA to join. Complete nonsense, but intimidating to anyone who didn't know better. She even roped in her nephew, a lawyer from 2 towns over, to send me a cease and desist letter demanding I stop undermining the HOA's authority. The letter was so riddled with legal gibberish, I laughed out loud reading it, filing it away for my growing MidnightTales evidence collection. The breaking point came on a crisp September Saturday. I was brewing coffee when my security camera app pinged with motion in my backyard. There was Karen, bold as brass, snapping photos of my garden shed and scribbling on a clipboard. She was trespassing on my property to document HOA violations for a house that wasn't even in the HOA. I stepped onto my deck, coffee in hand, and called out, "Can I help you with something?" She spun around, not a hint of shame, and waved her clipboard triumphantly. "I've documented 17 violations," she declared, listing an unapproved shed color, non-conforming garden decorations, and a bird feeder that allegedly exceeded the maximum allowable height. When I reminded her she was trespassing, she laughed, claiming HOA officials had the right to inspect any property in the neighborhood. That's when I dropped the bomb. "Karen," I said, voice calm as ice, "I'm a real estate attorney specializing in property law and HOA disputes." Her face was a masterpiece: shock, anger, and a flicker of fear. But Karen wasn't one to back down. "I don't care what you do for a living," she barked. "Rules are rules." She announced I'd be slapped with $3,000 in fines, then stormed off, nearly tripping over my garden hose. I couldn't wait to share this moment with my MidnightTales audience. What Karen didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this since her first letter. Every interaction was documented, every letter saved, every trespass caught on my security cameras. I'd even hired a private investigator to dig into her shady HOA practices. And what he found was pure gold for my MidnightTales storytelling. On Monday, Karen received 2 documents from my law firm. The first was a cease and desist letter outlining her harassment, defamation, and trespassing. The second was a lawsuit for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of my property rights, fraud from her forged documents, and abuse of power as HOA president. I could already picture the MidnightTales thumbnail for this episode. Karen's response was predictable. She called an emergency HOA meeting that night, rallying the neighborhood against me. "David Thornton is trying to destroy our community," she cried, voice dripping with indignation. "We must fight this threat." What she didn't expect was me strolling into the meeting just as her speech hit its peak. The room fell silent. I approached the podium, asked politely to speak, and despite Karen's objections, the board let me. I laid out the facts like a prosecutor on MidnightTales property records proving I wasn't in the HOA. Forged documents Karen had crafted, security footage of her trespassing. Then came the bombshell. My investigator had uncovered Karen's embezzlement of HOA funds, siphoning money for personal vacations and home upgrades while jacking up dues for maintenance costs. The room erupted. Neighbors who'd been too scared to speak shared stories of excessive fines, bullying, and mysterious fees. One elderly woman sobbed, recounting an $800 fine for her grandkids' chalk drawings. I mentioned a local news station, eager to air a MidnightTales-worthy expose on Karen's reign, was arriving tomorrow to interview residents. I also dropped that the district attorney was eyeing her embezzlement. Karen's face turned from red to white to a sickly green. The fallout was swift. A board member called for a no-confidence vote, which passed unanimously except for Karen's lone dissent. The news story aired, headlined "HOA President's Reign of Terror Ends in Scandal," featuring neighbors spilling their stories. The DA opened a formal investigation into Karen's embezzlement, with more residents coming forward. My lawsuit moved fast. Karen couldn't find a lawyer willing to touch her case after seeing the evidence, so she represented herself, floundering. In court, she tried submitting her forged city document as evidence, only for the judge to call her out for fraud in a tone that could have starred in a MidnightTales dramatic reenactment. My attorney presented our case: harassment via relentless letters, public defamation, trespassing on camera, forged documents, attempted extortion. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering Karen to pay $35,000 for harassment and emotional distress, plus $15,000 in legal fees, and issuing a restraining order keeping her 100 feet from my property. But Karen's troubles didn't end there. The criminal investigation revealed she'd misappropriated over $100,000 in HOA funds over 8 years, small, sneaky amounts for personal purchases, fake invoices, and duplicate reimbursements. At her trial, forensic accountants detailed her scheme, and former board members described her intimidation tactics. The prosecutor painted her as a power-drunk tyrant treating the HOA like her personal piggy bank. Karen's plea deal attempts failed, and after a 2-week trial, she was found guilty of embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and misuse of fiduciary duty. The sentencing hearing was packed, with half the neighborhood watching as the judge, after hearing victim impact statements, sentenced Karen to 3 years in prison and ordered $123,000 in restitution. As the bailiff cuffed her, Karen collapsed, sobbing hysterically. I couldn't help but think how this would make the ultimate MidnightTales finale. A story of justice served and a neighborhood freed from her reign.